All right, everyone, welcome to this. I guess it's the seventh consecutive Saturday, maybe it's the sixth, of questions and answers on misophonia. And today I'm going to focus on some of the tricks to manage triggers. But your questions take priority. So I am Tom Dozier, and I'm the president of the Misophonia Institute. And I've been studying misophonia for 12 years now. So let me give a couple of these tricks, not in any particular order. I put some of the most obvious ones later, but one of the things we find is that a human can focus your attention, for example, on a conversation in a noisy room, and you'll tune out the other sounds and be able to have the conversation. And that ability to focus on sensory input is a benefit when you have misophonia if you can focus on other stimuli. So for example, if you were watching a movie, let's say at home, and there was somebody making a trigger in the room, then focus intently on the movie. Notice the background. Notice the clothing that's on the features, on the characters. Put your mind on the sensory input that you're getting. And when you focus on one sense, you hear less of the triggers. So this is part of what I ask everyone to do when they're learning to manage triggers, because the real change in the reflexes in the body come from experience with triggers where you're interacting with them and you're not reinforcing that reflex by engaging in the really strong responses. The second thing I want to mention is that you can carry on. That if at all possible, just go on with what you're doing and pretend that the trigger didn't happen. So when you're carrying on with an activity, you can actually focus on the stimuli that are associated with that activity, but just carry on. Now, I'm going to say that I know you can't do this with major triggers, right? That if your head's exploding and you're going into a panic attack, then you can't just carry on. But if you can have a situation where triggers are occurring, if you walk into a room, you're going to go through the room and into the kitchen to get a drink, and you walk into the room and you see your trigger person there and you think they're going to make a trigger, if you can just keep on walking and focus on your path to get the drink, get your drink, and then go back, that's an example of carrying on. Avoiding judgment. It's important to try to not engage in the turmoil. And these sounds and sights that are triggers are normal human sounds. So we're not dealing with horrible sounds, terrible sounds. We're just dealing, I mean, they feel horrible and you feel terrible, but judging those sounds as being unacceptable to exist in the world it supports your reflex dialogue and schema, as they might say, some of the psychologists would say, that these sounds are horrible and they should be destroyed. Another thing that happens when a person is triggered is they go into this internal conversation with themselves, this internal monologue about how horrible the trigger is, how unfair it is, how rude it is, how how could they possibly make that sound when I've told them 500 times that that's triggering me? They don't care. They don't love me. They're a horrible person for making that sound. And that internal monologue that you have can last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute, an hour. It varies greatly with people. And when you engage, rather than talking about the trigger, it is best if you will simply focus on other stimuli. Notice the features, the little details. I talked about focusing on stimuli. I have my wife paints rocks. So here's a little rock she painted some time ago. It's a M&M with a chip out of it. And I can feel the texture of it. I can look at the eyes and the look on the face of the mouth. I can look at the little chip in it. But focusing on the details of something. If you're in the car, don't simply look out and see a tree. Notice the leaves, specific leaves, or the branches, or the shape. Notice details so that you can help you stop talking about the trigger. This self-talk extends your distress. Right? So as long as you're engaging in this self-talk, you are actually adding fuel to your anger and distress feeling. So again, just carry on, right? Try to go back into what you're doing and carry on. Okay, so I have a one here called No Threat But Thank You. And so my computer was so nice to have restarted overnight, and I'm trying to call back up the piece of information that I had, and I'm gonna go back to this in a moment, because right now I didn't print it out. I should have printed it out. Document auto recovered. Let's see what this is. Nope. How about this one? Document auto recovered. There it is. Okay. So pardon the pause. Let me go back in a way that we can, I can recover this. Okay, so I want to talk about no threat but thank you. There's a trigger is a reflex reaction. It's a physical reaction. It's an emotional reaction. And after the trigger, you have this very unpleasant feeling. So I propose that people try this, and this is what one person said. So basically, before I go into that, what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to trigger a warm, fuzzy response. Your lizard brain has heard you saying thank you hundreds of thousands of times in your life. And whenever you've said that, generally you've been in a good physiological state. So if you'll just try saying, everybody's muted, just try saying thank you, and then a little pleasant smile, and see if you get a warm fuzzy from it. At least half of the people I work with say they do. And so the short version is no threat, but thank you. And the long version is, hey, lizard brain, that sound you just heard is not a threat on my life, but thank you for trying to help me. So this is what somebody wrote in after I had suggested this in a video. Okay, it says, this person says, I must say, Tom Dozier, after watching your video from the 2014 Misophonia Association conference, I was shaking my head thinking, well, this is nonsense. After being violent most of my 61 years, and feeling that isolation and loud televisions and earplugs were going to follow me all the way to the grave, to the crematorium, I had an opportunity to use your lizard brain suggestion of telling myself that there was no threat, that it's okay. I was stuck in the car next to my husband on the way to the coast, facing 3 long hours of sniffing and crunching potato chips. I thought, what the heck? I'll give old Tom's advice a whirl. Guess what? I suppose the old dog new trick scenario works here. Much, much to my surprise, I didn't feel like jumping from the car onto the freeway. I also had a chance to use it while my husband was snoring in the hotel. I did get up after an hour and get my earplugs, but I didn't feel as angry. Good for you, Tom. I advise anyone who suffers to just give this a try. It won't take the problem away, but then again, you probably won't be featured on America's Most Wanted. So that's someone's advice or comment from trying this, and it really does. For a lot of people, it triggers a warm fuzzy. Now, I've never been triggered, but when I talk with people, I talk about having a warm fuzzy versus a miso yucky response. And that ugly feeling that you get after a trigger, if you can trigger that, thank you, and get a little whir over the body, then you can halt that. Okay. I'm glad. It's another one. Like, if there was a sound that you didn't like and somebody was doing from somebody doing their work, you might say, well, I'm glad that somebody else does this particular task. One person told me about being in a Mexican restaurant and the family on the table over near her was going after after the chips and the salsa, and they were all digging in. And she said to herself, I'm glad that family can go out and have a good meal together. And she said, and I never noticed them the rest of the evening. Now, that's not the normal thing that worked for everyone, but having a positive spin, I'm glad that somebody else can enjoy that. I think that I'm glad kind of changes the context of it, and context is important. Now, I'll do 2 more and then we'll go into some questions. Changing the meaning, trying to make it funny. Last week, Sean was here, and Sean suggested kind of saying it in his head, well, crunch, 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 you know, and he says it's helped him. But if you can change the meaning, if you can make it be a sound effect, if you can say, that sounds like my horse eating, and then you don't have to experience the same context, and the trigger can be significantly different. Now, I want to ask for a show of hands here for a moment, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to say, is there anyone here who is going to be triggered by a horse eating? One hand. No, that was my hand. That's my cursor on Savannah. Okay, so this is an example of, I have a video of a horse eating. And let's get this up. And I'll show just a little bit of it. So the goal here would be to think about, he sounds just like that horse. Okay, that's probably enough of that. But you get my point, is that if you can put that other sound, change the context, they sound like they're from making a movie and they're doing a sound effect, or anything that you can do to change the context can reduce your trigger severity. Okay, let me go back to the last one here. And the last one on this page is to try to make a big smile. That when you make a big smile like this, great big smile, maximum smile, your lizard brain sees it and it actually triggers a release of serotonin and endorphins, and now I don't have the other one, dopamine, into your brain. And so you're actually taking, by smiling really big for 20 seconds, you're actually taking a little bit of a pill, of a feel-good pill. Now, you probably can't do this right after you've been triggered. But a lot of people have a very long, extended feeling after a trigger. And so once your anger has subsided, you can use this big smile so that you can basically make yourself feel a little bit better, trigger a release of a feel-good pill, and reduce the length of the feeling that you'd have after a trigger. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm going to ask, does anybody have a question at this point, either about what I presented or totally different topic? Yes, Joanne.
I've suffered from misophonia and mykinesia since I've been a young girl. And I can remember the day that it started. And it was when my sister was eating an apple and I asked her to please chew it loud, softer. And she did it even louder and continued that with all different things. And is it a common trigger that you think people are doing this just to aggravate you? Because that's what I feel. I've had it all my life.
So you're talking about the how it starts?
No, the whole time, every time something happens and I'm triggered, either with movements or noises, I think I feel that they're doing it just to aggravate me or to annoy me.
That
Is that
that
common?
that is very common, Joanne. Um, your sister was, but you know the almost no one is doing it to annoy you.
I know
Now,
that.
you're probably a bit, were you a bit of a perfectionist at that age?
I believe so, and I still am, yeah.
Okay, because perfectionism is probably the strongest tie to misophonia that I've seen. And what happened is you had a rule for eating, and your rule said you should eat quietly, chew quietly. Now, your mom or dad may have said chew with your mouth closed at one time, and you expanded that rule to chew silently. And so you were hearing your sister chewing, and she was breaking the rule. And when you start hearing something and you go, that's not fair, that's not right, and you're tensing up in your body, and the reflex develops. So then once she's doing it on purpose, then it's even worse, and and it just causes it to escalate horribly. But no, Joanne, people do not make these sounds on purpose.
I know. I know.
Right? You know that now that you're not being triggered, right? But
Yeah.
and in childhood, well, actually, people sometimes have to be careful where they work. If it's a hostile environment, potentially, then somebody finds out what your trigger is. One person was triggered by whistling, and he worked in at the post office. And once somebody found out that it upset him, then they would whistle randomly at times, like, "Oh, I'm not doing all. I just, they'd plead innocent, but they weren't innocent."
Yeah.
So that does happen some places.
And
Did I answer your question well enough?
yeah. Were you involved in the very first Misophonia convention at Orange County Convention Center in Florida? Because I attended that, and I wondered if you it was in the in the early 2000.
Yeah, that's when the hurricane came through shortly thereafter, I believe.
Yeah.
I have been, well, the first convention was in Oregon in 2013. And then it must have been 2014 when we were down in Florida. But
Okay.
I've been involved in some way in every convention.
Yeah, I attended that. I was surprised to see how many people were there.
Yeah,
Others-
and those are very good conventions, and they're still going on. And I think this year is going to be in Dallas
Mhm.
in October. Okay, another question or comment, anyone? Oh, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the next slide I have here and talk about some of these other things. Okay, now this is going to be like stating the obvious to you, okay? But avoid prolonged exposure to triggers. Um, you, when you are triggered in the normal world, it actually strengthens the physical reflexes of misophonia and the emotional reflexes of misophonia. So you're getting a double whammy of making your misophonia worse. So you don't want to endure triggers and that horrible, it feels terrible to start with it, but you want to excuse yourself. If you're trying to do work, there's no problem at all with blocking out the triggers, um, but try to find ways to avoid the prolonged exposure to triggers. And one of the things you can do is you can help add noise to the room. Adding a sound machine, uh, headphones, and a white noise app. I like the TM Soft apps. The pink one is white noise light. It's free. The blue one's $1. It doesn't pop up an ad. I mean, doesn't take over your app unless you accidentally hit the add button. So adding noise reduces the perceived volume of the trigger, and it detracts from the fidelity or the purity of the trigger, so it doesn't trigger you as much. Adding noise can also be done with these sound generators. And a sound generator is a hearing aid body that can either play from your phone or have a pink noise or rain sound in the generator so that you can have that going in your ears very discreetly. Coming back to our presentation here, noise canceling headphones can be very beneficial. With noise canceling headphones, I love the AirPod Pros too. Fantastic headphone earbuds for a person, because you can have it either in noise canceling or transparency. And so you actually can add the noise into your ears with this, but then if you need the extra blocking ability, you can go into noise canceling mode. Relax your muscles. What's your initial physical reflex, your IPR? Um, is there, everybody has one of these reflexes, I believe. I've had a few people that we weren't able to identify where it was exactly, but I believe that this is what drives your misophonia, is you hear the sound and then you stop breathing briefly, or your shoulders tense, or your neck tense, or your hands move. And if you don't know your initial physical reflex, just relax your body. And the progressive muscle relaxation training app helps you build the neurological connections to be able to relax on demand. And so we're like, you very easy to just relax your hand, like, oh, relax. I can just let it go. But it's very hard to relax your neck that way, or your back, or your toes curling. So the progressive muscle relaxation training is something that, with the people I work with, generally I advise that they do once a day. We start, if a person has anxiety, which anxiety is very common with misophonia, and a person has anxiety, we would start with 4 sessions a day, and then 3 sessions a day for a week and 2 sessions a day for a week and then 1 session a day forever. And the progressive muscle relaxation gets you into a state of deep relaxation. It improves your health and well-being, but it also develops the neurological connections in your brain to go relax and just let the extra tension go out of your body. If you want to try that, it's a free app with paid features if you want the paid features, but it's fully functional as a free app. Another thing that a lot of people have, one more comment about the relax your muscles. When you are angry, your anger includes tense muscles. And so if you just try to relax your muscles, you're giving a message to your brain that you're not angry. So your brain up here is perceiving that you've been insulted and you've been attacked and you're angry, and it goes, well, how's the body? What's the word coming from the body? And the brain says, I'm angry. And it goes, body says, I'm relaxed. I'm angry. I'm relaxed. And it's a little bit like throwing a blanket on a fire. It doesn't eliminate the heat, but it pulls it down from an anger standpoint. Okay, breathe slowly and steadily, constantly. There's a significant number of people who feel a trigger in their chest, and what they're feeling is breath, something that alters their breath. The lizard brain is making them stop breathing. It's making some people breathe in or breathe out. It could be from the diaphragm. It could be from up in the chest. And if you have that kind of a reflex, that kind of response to the trigger, then breathing slowly and steadily, constantly in situations where there are mild triggers will reduce your misophonia and allow it to go away. Okay. And one of the last ones on this page is make your own noise. If, you know, Marsha Johnson, who first identified misophonia, suggests having, for, you know, ladies, have in your purse some corn nuts, some gum, and if somebody's eating something crunchy, pull out your corn nuts and eat a few I don't know if you've never had corn nuts, they are extremely loud. And so you're making your own sound. And the same thing, if others people are chewing gum, you should chew gum because it helps to make your own sound noise in your brain. And if you're hearing your gum chewing and the other person's gum chewing, your brain isn't sure which is you and which is them, and it can often bring the trigger down. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and going to ask, do we have any comments, or anybody tried any of these things, or any tricks?
Yeah, I have. Hello.
Yes, please. Thank
Hi.
Marge.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I've tried. We do white noise, and I have it. My partner and I, we have separate bedrooms, and I have a huge air purifier in my bedroom, and it really helps. You know.
Okay,
So,
good.
Yeah.
Now, Marge, do you ever have situations where you are hearing some triggers, but they're not, with the noise and everything, you've made it much smaller than it would be otherwise?
Yeah, my partner every once in a while. Can I say a trigger? I mean, is that okay? Or
Yeah, that's okay. If we keep
okay.
them to a minimum.
He does a little like a soft cough, and I
Okay.
can hear it even if he could be in the living room and I could be in my bedroom. I'll hear
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so I do that, whatever, I do that, hand gesture, like, okay, well, thank you very much, but I don't need you right now. My lizard brain, I don't really need you right now. Thank you.
Okay.
And then that really
And carry
helps.
on, right?
Yeah.
And then,
It's just,
okay.
It's remarkable,
Okay, good. So the one of the things for taming that lizard brain is small triggers where you can relax and breathe and carry on and keep your mind out of the meso trigger gutter, right? Stay on whatever you're doing. That creates a counter conditioning event that allows your misophonia to decay. And so to try to run and hide from all triggers is a problem because you're constantly aware and on alert and you're worried about it. That's hazardous for you. To endure prolonged misophonia triggers, that's also hazardous for you. So we're looking at the time, looking for you to try to find a time when you're not trying to do a mental task and, trying to take care of something, but where you can engage in the world around you with little bits of triggers, as little as possible. And that actually sets up, if you're relaxed and engaging in something, that actually sets up a situation where your brainstem, I call it your lizard brain, can change and stop and back down a little bit. Now I saw anybody comment or want to, please, if you do jump in. But look for a chat. Yes, Joanne.
I've done all those things forever and they all work well, except mycanosia, or what is it called? Myconesia.
Okay, so let me just say there's a word that was presented in 2014, misokinesia.
Yeah.
It's now, from a common perspective of discussion of misophonia, it's now a visual trigger of misophonia.
Okay.
So just consider it a visual trigger versus an auditory trigger. Some people have a vibration trigger. Somebody does something and they bump their desk at work or the wall at work of hanging, in a modular office, and it triggers them. So visual triggers. So with visual triggers, what's your question, Joanne?
I have both, and it's both the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I can handle the air machine and all that, but when it comes to the visual, I can only hide my eyes for so long in so many positions, and it's tough.
It is tough. It is tough. Now, I'll tell you, is this your husband or partner that's making these movement triggers?
Mostly, yeah. But
Okay.
too, if I'm at a movie theater and somebody's moving their hand or foot or their head a certain way, I have to leave.
Okay, so if you're on an elevator, you just close your eyes and open it every time you get to the next the next floor, whatever, right? But if it's your partner, you're stuck with them, right? You're trying to do things and you're stuck with them. So if you want to make this go down, you actually can have a weak exposure to triggers. And one of the things you can do is you can make a video of your husband moving his feet, if that's what it was, for example. Yes. And then you put it on your computer as a little window down in the corner.
Oh.
And you relax and you watch just a little, like 2 seconds or whatever, just enough to barely bump you, and then go back to what you're doing. Now, this is the difficulty of doing something like this, is even if the trigger is a 2 out of 10, your head's not exploding, but it's still not considered a pleasant activity, right?
Right.
Right. So you have to be motivated and you have to be gentle. And the more gentle you are by getting little bits of triggers, the better off you'll be. Joanne, do you know where your when you hear a trigger, do you simply feel angry or do you have a physical response also?
Both.
Where do you feel your physical response?
In my chest, my arms.
Okay, so I'm going to guess you have a breath reflex. There are some people who have an anxiety response in their chest, and breathing doesn't change it. So what I want you to do is the next time you're seeing a trigger, start breathing in slowly and breathing out slowly. And if that trigger sensation goes from a 6 to a 5 when you're breathing in or breathing out or both, then you have a breath reflex.
Okay.
And so if you consistently breathe while triggers, control your breathing. So do you sing, Joanne?
No, not really.
Can you sing happy birthday?
I can, yeah.
Can you hum?
Yes.
See, if you're singing or humming, or even if you had a soliloquy that you wanted to mumble to yourself, when you're talking or singing or humming, you're controlling your breath. When we breathe, when we're talking or singing or humming, we take a breath and then we relax our lungs completely. We relax these muscles and we're just using the balloon effect of our lungs to push the air out. We're not actually pushing it out with our muscles. And so you're breathing in, you're controlling the muscles, you're humming or mumbling to yourself, you're also relaxing those muscles, and it will allow that trigger to go down. And if you find, and so with the visual trigger, for example, Joanne, you would have the little video of the trigger, and let's just suppose that you feel less triggered when you're breathing out. So you breathe in, you start to breathe out, you click the video, you breathe out, you're breathing out, you're breathing out, you stop it. And you're just taking little samples of the trigger while you're specifically breathing. I'm working with a person who's making good progress, but it's hard to get these triggers to be gone completely. And one of the things she's done with some of her family members is count to 10 and make a trigger. So a little alarm goes off, ring, and she knows they're going to make a trigger. So she relaxes and she starts to breathe, and then they make a little trigger, and then she's back in with whatever's going on, because that way she's doing the right physical behavior to make your misophonia go down. So try that breathing and see how that works for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions or comments? Yes, Shelby.
I have one. Oh, sorry.
Yes, please, Shelby.
With that, if we set up a situation where my daughter and I practice this, and she relaxes and gets hold of herself and whatever, and I can introduce a K sound and she can practice with that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying is that in fact, is she triggered by anyone else other than you?
Her husband.
Then, and is that equally strong as you?
Well, we never stood together and compared.
Well, she would know who triggers her
She'll
worse.
know.
Okay. And
Okay.
and is it a different if you say take where the K is at the end, or kitchen where the K is at the front?
Probably in the
end.
final position in the word, but it happens. It happens.
Well, one of the keys is trying to make small triggers where you can relax your body and breathe, depending on whether you have a breath
Yeah,
reflex, right? I mean, that's the first thing I do when I meet with a person for the first time, I explain misophonia theory, and then we try to find where it's hitting in their body. And so you can yeah, so small sounds while you're engaged in something else. I worked with a woman who was 85 years old, and she was a religious woman, had attended church all of her life. She had a breath reflex, and so her grandson-in-law made her a video, an audio track of her triggers, and so that she could adjust the volume of it, right? So she could play it down low. And she had one of her old hymn books, and she had poor eyesight, so she had a magnifying glass. And if you've ever, sung a song that has multiple verses to it, you have to stay on the right line and move back and forth. And she's doing this with her magnifying glass, trying to go back and forth. And her trigger just faded out. So she also had a trigger for the sound of pouring dog food into a metal bowl. And so even when she did it, it triggered her. And so she would get ready to feed her dog, and she would breathe in, start breathing out, clink, 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 clink. And she would make sure that she was breathing while she was pouring the food, and that got rid of the trigger.
One other question, a little off this. My daughter's very worried that she may develop triggers to her son. Is there anything she can do or think about or not think about? She's mentioned it a few times to me.
Well, the more you think about it, the more likely you are to develop a trigger.
That's what I thought. Right.
Right.
I'll tell her to can that.
The other thing is using some things like I'm glad, Josh is such a neat boy, or such a sweet kid.
Yeah.
I just love Josh. Josh is wonderful, and trying to have that positive endorphins going. But it's a real problem. I mean, he's going to go, how old is your grandson?
9.
He's going to go from 9 to 15. And when he hit 15, he's not going to be such a cute little boy. He's going to be a stinky teenager.
Yeah,
okay?
I know.
I'm
been
speaking
there
as a parenting coach, right? And so it's a real risk. If she could do something to work on her trigger to you and her husband, then at least that would start to show her. And if it ever starts, immediately go to work on it, because it's easier.
Yeah, it grows.
To change, because it grows and strengthens, and it may first just be an ending K, and then it's a beginning K, and then it's a KH sound, and then whatever. Or probably not a KH sound in that we use in English. I'm to the speech pathologist. I think I just named a sound that we don't use. But anyway, yes.
That's all right.
But
on top of everything else, just as an added sort of a joke of nature, I have Sjogren's, which makes my mouth dry, which adds to the thickness of my saliva, which makes everything worse.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And you're not doing it on purpose. So
see?
Thank you.
Okay.
I know that. She knows that too, but yeah, we're working.
Yeah. But it still hurts.
Yeah, very much. Thank you.
Okay. So Diana has what looks like a comment, but maybe I'm reading it wrong. Tips. I can give 14-year-old son who smacks his ears when he hears or sees a trigger. Oh, what can you do for your 14-year-old son who smacks his ears when he hears or sees a trigger? Okay, I think one of the reasons he probably smacks his ears is he probably has.
Want to hear it?
Well, there's two issues. Does he? So Diana, does he not want to hear it, or does he actually have pain in the ears? And you can say it online, or you can type it in. But is he having? Does he complain about pain in his ear?
He does. He complains about pain in his ear.
Okay, So that's tensor tympani syndrome, or tympani tensor syndrome, and I never can remember which one it is. And that there's a muscle in the ear that tightens whenever the sound is too loud. So like an air horn, it would tighten so that it doesn't, to protect the little tender sensors in the ear. And so Dr. Yastreboff, who named this as condition misophonia, says that that's a secondary reaction, and if you can get rid of the misophonia reaction, then the tensor tympani syndrome can go away. But I have not been successful at working with that. The problem here is yeah, he's hitting himself. Is your son very anxious? Is he very emotional? Or is he diligent enough to try something else, do you think?
He's very stubborn. He's not like, for example, he says he can't wear headphones because if he hears it through the headphones, he feels a compulsion to take the headphones off and still cover and slap his ears.
Okay. It's a really tough situation because slapping his ear creates a sensation that that distracts him from the misophonia, right? And so from a behavior analysis viewpoint, you have a situation, you have a behavior, and a consequence. So the situation is he hears a trigger, the behavior, and he feels the zap in his ears, and he gets the overall anger and a horrible trigger feeling. And then he slaps himself in the ear. That puts the pain out here on the ear that he's done, and it probably stops that miso yucky response and him thinking about the triggers. And so that's a payoff. That's almost like a obsessive compulsive behavior.
Yes.
And it's very hard to work with that. So I can't give you I wish I had a better solution, but I can't.
Thank you.
I will say if your son is 14 and try to use incentives to help him do the things he needs to do. Incentives are better than demands. And you don't want to go overboard, but you know, when you can engage him in some way for him trying to do it, wanting to interact nicely with people, incentives can help in those situations, but it's still a horrible motivation problem.
Got a thing there. They didn't have to cover their camera. How do you get that?
Kimberly, are you going to make a comment, or are you just talking to somebody that's right there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just muted you. If you were making a comment, I like people to jump in. I'm perfectly fine with that. Okay, so not a problem at all. Okay, another question or comment? Okay, I've got a couple of other things here. So let me go back to the sharing.
I have a question.
Okay, Marge, is that Marge? Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, so like, are these triggers, I mean, usually like somebody's trying to correct something, like people that are making the triggers, they're breaking the rules or something like that. I mean, like some kind of rule that we have, and they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't break the rule, or
right.
You know, I mean, my example is that my mother had, her teeth were crooked, her upper teeth, in upper jaw. And then, so then she had, when I was like 13, you know, she had me get braces put on my teeth so that they'd be nice and straight. And then I think I started realizing that her teeth were crooked, you know. And then and then I noticed the noise that she would make with her teeth.
Yes.
And you know, like I feel like she was, you know, breaking the rules or something. Like does
Right.
that make sense?
That makes that's a very well expressed, that when somebody breaks the rule that you think should be followed, you're going to tense somewhere in your body, right? And they broke the rule. They broke the rule. They broke the rule. And then do that 5 times, and your lizard brain sees it, and then you go, oh, they broke the rule, and your lizard brain goes boop, and it hits you. So it's rule breaking is probably the biggest reason that people develop triggers.
Oh God.
So you wanna chill out about these rules that okay, here's a neat little saying. To expect life to be tailored to your specifications is to invite frustration. Right? We are not the etiquette police for the world. And when we become the etiquette police for any particular person or thing, we start reacting when they're breaking the rules. So you've described how to develop misophonia very well. And that comes back to Shelby's daughter and grandson, that if your daughter can look at whatever her son does as cute, right, then as long as she can keep considering it cute, it's not going to be a trigger situation. What probably happened with her husband is that he was similar enough to you, and one day she says, well, he sounds just like mom, and so it's going. Okay, we had a question from Joanne. Joanne.
Do you find, or do you know if propropanol, is that the correct pronunciation, helps with the rage?
Yeah, it's called propranolol, Propranolol. And it's called a beta blocker. I don't know why it's called a beta blocker, but I don't know what it's referring to, but it's called a beta blocker. And what it does is it stops the cortisol boost that you get, or adrenaline boost you get after a trigger. And so if you have a strong physical reaction, then propranolol can reduce that. It's primarily a heart pressure, blood pressure medication, or a presentation anxiety medication. And propranolol doesn't have to be brought up slowly and then brought down like an SSRI. It can a person can try it. If it helps, it helps. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Okay. Another question, anyone? Okay, so I'm going to go.
I think Elizabeth has a question, I think.
Elizabeth, do you have a question?
No, I sort of do. There's one trigger I have that nobody's mentioned, and it's the damn toothpick. I have had friends sitting in a restaurant and they take out their toothpick and go like that for hours. And it drives me crazy. And I sit there and I don't say anything, of course. But is this something that somebody else has had, or is this?
Well, let's not try to go too much into that, because any visual stimuli can become a trigger. Okay, and so we really try to not dwell on people thinking, have I ever noticed that? Now, and then if you start noticing it, you're like, oh, they're doing it too, and you start to develop triggers. So that's a particular problem of misophonia, is that somebody suggests one, some people pick up triggers. In fact, I had one person who wasn't going to be on this because of the thought that triggers would be mentioned, and we do typically mention triggers on this presentation. But Elizabeth, you have your eyes to close, right?
Yes.
And
I can look away.
You can look away, and you can breathe, right? is that a breath? Does breathing help with that trigger?
Yeah, you know, I'm most sympathetic.
Yeah, no, but I'm asking for you. Breathing helps a little bit, right? You have a breath reflex. Okay, so that's 20 minutes of misophonia lizard brain opportunity for you to do the slow, steady breathing. You look away for a while, calm down, make sure you're breathing, look back, smile and nod. Yeah, keep breathing, and then close your eyes and keep breathing. It's a horrible opportunity, but it is an opportunity for your lizard brain to change. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so let me go back to I think I got a couple of more items here on our list of managing triggers. Okay, so here we are. So we're just talking about visual triggers. Look away. As hard as that sounds simple, but it can be very, very hard. One lady was I think this was on a Facebook group, was talking about people chomping gum really, really strongly. And she says, I was at this light and I looked over and the guy next to me was just chomping away on his gum. She said, and so I just glared at him, you know, and like people with visual triggers often want to give the death stare to tell them you're doing something wrong. But at the same time, she's taking this trigger in by glaring at him, right? So who's she torturing? She's torturing herself. So looking away can be very difficult, but it's very beneficial to not have that strong triggering experience, which again just makes the reflexes in the brain, the physical and emotional reflexes, much stronger. The last thing I want to mention here is to don't track your trigger person. There are a lot of people, kids do it the most, but they go into a room. Let's just suppose, you know, that the mom is the trigger person. They go into the room and they start saying, "Where's mom? Mom's over here." They're supposed to be watching TV, and they keep looking over at mom and just, is she gonna make a sound? Is she gonna do that? And when you look for triggers, you find triggers. You start noticing that person and noticing the little things they do. There was a family I worked with over, it was probably at least a 2-year period off and on. And the daughter was doing much, much better, but she was still having some problems with her mother's sounds. And then I realized, because I'm not, you know, it wasn't brought up every time. And I started thinking, well, is your daughter tracking you, right? Are you watching your mother? I asked her. She goes, well, yeah. I mean, I need to know when she's going to make a trigger so I can protect myself. I said, okay, your job is to never, when you're in the room with your mother, never look at her unless she's talking to you or you're talking to her. Right? Just pretend I give you permission as a teenager to ignore your mother unless she's talking to you or you're talking to her. And that was the final, and that was something that mom and dad could see when she's doing or not doing. And they would like say, what are you supposed to be doing? Anything other than looking at mom. Right. And so that was, that actually was the last thing that basically just brought the misophonia to where it was a non-event. But they would go to church and she would watch her mother, right? They would be in the living room doing something and she'd watch her mother. And again, if you track your trigger person, you will create triggers. Okay?
Oh boy, I have to second that. My daughter doesn't take her eyes off me. All right, thank you.
My mother didn't.
Right. And so that's a very, just that idea that it's not, that it's so important I need to know where a mom is keeps that person's mind focused on that system, right? On that fact, on that there's mom's a trigger person, maybe she's going to make a trigger. Yep, there it is. There it is. And that happens. So okay, everyone, do we have any other questions today? Comments?
Yes, one other comment from the other side. Thank God I don't have misophonia. It would help me as the person who emits the triggers to have my daughter say to me, is it possible to say, I know it's not your fault, it's me. Is that possible? Because
Yes.
that would make me feel so much better.
Yes. And in fact, I often will ask a person that I'm working with, do you recognize right now when the trigger is not happening that these are normal sounds, that you're experiencing a reaction to a normal sound?
Mhm.
And usually a person can acknowledge that that is a normal sound, but in the moment it triggers them and it feels like there's something wrong because they're literally being tasered. Shelby,
They're being tortured. They're being tortured.
have you have you seen me use my big rubber band? Okay, so I want you to say,
Oh, yes, yes, I
yes,
do
that
remember.
it's trigger.
No, I understand, and I understand how
Right.
awful this is. It
It-
just would help the
Yes.
person who's trying to help and
Yes.
it doesn't, that's all. It's just a word
No.
to everybody else.
I think that would be beneficial to you, to ask nicely the daughter that's more working on it and managing it.
She does it. She tells me. She said, I know it's me, it's not you, Mom. And that's just so great. I just thought I'd pass that along.
Oh, okay, good. All right, Lyle, you have your hand up. Talk to us.
Yeah, I just wanted to put a footnote in about Inderol or propranolol. It's a cardiac medication. It's given for certain arrhythmias and it lowers blood pressure. So it really should be monitored by a physician if somebody's going to take that. And I'm sure, you can't get it without a prescription anyway, but it should be closely monitored if somebody's going to. That's all I wanted to say, just on a safety side.
I appreciate that. Yes, and I'm not a doctor, and Lyle's a nurse, but not a doctor. But he knows better than I do. So anyway, so that'd be great. Thanks for sharing that, Lyle. All right,
Okay.
This is going to be your one last chance before I say goodbye.
I wish you would
I have
move
a
to Florida. You're wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to make a difference. In fact, I'm so excited that right now it's going before the Institutional Review Board for the University of North Texas to do a treatment study starting in September, hopefully, on using the theories and the techniques that we've talked about here. And I'm expecting great things. And the positive thing about that is that I have talked about misophonia having this physical and emotional reflexes for 12 years. And it's been vastly ignored and underrated. But I see it with people all the time. And so having a university do an official study of this treatment method is a way of getting this into broad view of people knowing to know what misophonia really is, and then people who are a lot smarter than I am at changing conditioned reflexes maybe can help us make some great strides in this. So, All right. Well, thank you very much for attending today and participating. We'll have one more session this summer. It'll be next Saturday, the 14th. And then I will take a break for the rest of the summer. Well, at least toward the end of July, because I'm going to have family here. All right. I wish everybody well, and Lyle, stay online.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.